whilst that is a part of it, it's not all of it. I want to talk about how, you know, that when you're in a long-term relationship and at some point it starts to feel stretched. You know, it feels like, especially, I mean, since I've become a mum, I can say, especially when you've got a family, but, you know, I've been married before without children, and it happens then as well, where you just feel like you're doing the day-to-day and you're going through the mundane. And let's face it, as particularly as women, we often feel like we're carrying the load domestically. Kind of we are a lot of the time. Men's focus is generally on other things, whereas, you know, they have a very focal sense of focus. They're really directed in their focus, and they generally focus on one thing at a time. Hi Lou, thanks for watching, honey. And women's focus is diffuse. You know, generally women have a much more open focus and are aware of many more things. And this means that women generally are aware of the domestics in a relationship. We're aware of, you know, tidying up and cleaning up, getting the kids' lunches ready, getting the kids to school, you know, getting in touch with the mother-in-law, getting in touch with our friends, making sure that the backyard is clean. And when are we going to do that? On Saturday, we've got an engagement happening, so we can't do it then. So Sunday, like, we've just got all these things in our mind, and so we are really truly juggling a lot. And then in amongst that, we're usually also, you know, maybe have a career or some work, or that we're working on, or creative projects. That there's just so much going on, and so we feel really stretched. And all of that's totally legitimate. It's nobody's fault. It's just, you know, the way that it is. And when it does, and, you know, if we look at the pinnacle of pleasure and we look at making love, how often do we just not feel like it? You know, like it's often the case, and that's not always the case, but I do know for a lot of women, it gets to a point in a long-term relationship where you just kind of, you know, you just don't feel like it. And why don't you feel like it? You justify it a lot. Well, we justify it a lot. I'm too tired. I've got too much on my mind. But the reality is that often we've shut down our sense of pleasure. We've shut down our pleasure center. And what that means is the relationship has become a utilitarian thing. It's become, you know, like a business transaction, and it's what we do. And, you know, women are such creatures of pleasure. Like we really are. When we've got time and we're just on our own, we seek out pleasure. And if we shut down our ability to receive pleasure, then all sorts of things go wrong in our relationship. On the other end of that, when we open up our ability to receive pleasure just for pleasure's sake, then we start to experience our relationships in a different way. We start to experience the world in a different way. We start to experience our relationship in a way that we start to feel like our men are serving us, that they care about us. We start to feel like a woman again. We soften, we become more vulnerable, we become more open. And it's often a massive jump, though, to get there, when you feel like you're just carrying so much. And we take it to bed, you know, we're thinking about all those things that we're juggling. And when we go to bed, we're still juggling all those things. And so when our man approaches us, we're like, you know, my head's here, not over here. And so what I want to speak about here is just encouraging women to open up the possibility to receive pleasure. So when you're next in a situation that your partner or your man is wanting to approach you, you know, maybe it's for sex, maybe it's a kiss, maybe it's a cuddle, or soft and gentle words, and you find yourself not, you know, closing up or not able to receive, just ask yourself the question, well, what if I could receive this right now? What if I was able to open up and receive pleasure just for pleasure's sake? And look, I've done this myself. Even recently in my marriage, you know, I found that I was really kind of tight and getting a lot of shit done all the time. And that's what my focus was. And when I stopped and asked myself, well, can I open up to pleasure? What would happen if I opened up to pleasure right now and received it? And so many things come up, you know, like I feel guilty. I feel like, well, I've got other things to do, and who am I to just have pleasure, just pleasure for pleasure's sake in this moment. You know, there's so many other things, and maybe he needs pleasure, or maybe my son needs some pleasure, or, you know, there's other things where my focus needs to be, and we just have to let it go, keep letting that go, letting it go, and just receive pleasure for pleasure's sake. It actually brings us so close to our heart, and so close to our soul, and so close to the divine when we are able to open up to that sense of pleasure. Now, I'm not the guru on pleasure. I certainly, still have a lot to learn myself. It's definitely an aspect, though, of having a healthy relationship. Somebody who is an expert on pleasure is a beautiful friend of mine who visited me a couple of weeks ago and actually got me to thinking about the aspect of pleasure in my relationship, and that's Saida Desolé, who you'll be able to find on Facebook, and you can search her, but she really has done so much work to understand pleasure and how it connects us to ourself and to our sense of divinity. And anyhow, having her, beautiful Saida, if you're watching this, hello, in my home the other day reminded me what it means to have the ability to open up to pleasure, and how that really is a challenge for so many women. And I highly encourage you to do what I've been doing myself, and that is just to practice receiving pleasure, even when your body says no, even when your mind says no. And that doesn't mean to override a sense of, no, because you don't like the person. That means just checking in, like, can I actually receive pleasure right now? Has it become a habit to say no? Has it become a habit to shut down because I just have to get shit done? And see what happens. I'd love to hear from you if you're in relationships and you start to practice this. I'd love to hear what it does for you. I know in my relationship what it does when I do this is Warwick starts to be like just this, I start to see him like this beautiful, strong, delicious man again. And I actually start playing with my son more, and just, taking the time to moisturize my whole body, little things like that. And what happens is, the stories I've told myself in the past that things won't get done and the dishes will be left all day and da-da-da-da-da, none of that happens. Warwick steps up and he does more to make, and I think it's an unconscious thing where, as a man, he likes to see me in my pleasure because I'm more open and more soft and more vulnerable, more available. So he supports that in his way, in that way, even though he's probably not conscious of it. I'm getting a million messages through, which is why I just lost my train of thought. Anyhow, that's right. On the other hand, trying to get Warwick to do more and to, take on more of the stuff around the house by asking him to do it, it always just ends up in him feeling emasculated, the dynamic between us being stretched, and it never ends up the way that I want it to be. So many women talk about, I don't want to tell him what to do, I just want him to know. And I understand that. At the same time, men can't read our minds, and but at the same time, when we open up, when we step into that polarity, that feminine polarity, which really is part of being open to receive pleasure, when we do that, and when I do that, I see Warwick step up, take more charge, take on his own bat a lot of the things around the house that I thought were going to, the house was going to fall to pieces, or life was going to fall to pieces if I just took more time for pleasure. So I'm enjoying doing this, and I'd love to hear from you and see what your experience is of opening up to pleasure or not opening up to pleasure in your relationships. Bye.